Welcome to Telegeography Explains the Internet, the show that explores the business behind all of the ways humans stay connected around the world. I'm your host, Greg Bryan, and my guest today is Mark Daley. He's Director of Digital Strategy and Business Development at Epsilon. Mark, as you will hear, is a veteran of the telecom industry and has been at Epsilon for nearly a decade, where he has been directly involved with SDN and their network as a service offering. Our main topic of conversation today was around NaaS and how it's unfolding in the marketplace. Of course, as I often do, I started by getting Mark's definition of NaaS and where he sees its availability emerging in the current telecom services landscape. Mark has what I thought was a really useful list of NaaS characteristics, which we spend some time talking about. That is, that it is visible, configurable, priceable, orderable, deployable, and manageable. It's really useful to hear him flesh out what each of those means for customers. Mark also had some useful insights into how NaaS has evolved over time and which steps vendors took that did and did not work out so well. And finally, we talk about Epsilon's history and how its mission became integrated into an incumbent provider after their acquisition by Korea Telecom. So this episode brought a lot of clarity for me on what to expect in the NaaS market in the coming years, and I hope it will for you as well. Enjoy. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks, Greg. I am excited to join and to be here and to catch up with you again. So
yeah,
look forward to having a really good chat.
And you know, you were just telling me before the show that you used to do your own podcast. You're an old pro with this, so I think I'm looking forward to our conversation. So hopefully, no distractions. You're in your boardroom there. It looks nice and quiet. So
yeah, for the moment at least, until some normal hiccup that a carrier traditionally experiences occurs, but
of course,
good for now.
Of course. My biggest one is our office is sometimes on the path to the White House. So if someone important is moving back and forth, the sirens will overwhelm me. So I'll stop us if that happens.
Interestingly enough, we are located where my let's call it European, but essentially the business headquarters is here in London, where I'm based, and I'm in it right now. It's located right next to one of the oldest military divisions in the world, the traditional Royal Horse Artillery, I think they're called. So there's an army base right next to us, right in the city of London.
Right.
And quite often we get like a whole bunch of Chinooks and stuff flying over. So you hear
shaking the whole building.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So Mark, we almost always start the show just with an introduction of yourself. I figure it's always better for you to tell your story than me to read some bio. So please, tell us who you are and what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mark Daley. So I work for a company called Epsilon Telecommunications. Essentially, apart from what my job title says, I look after product as well as really looking for new things, new technologies, new partners, new vendors as well. So it's a really interesting role. I've been really lucky to have that role now for 9 years. I actually started at Epsilon as Director of Corporate Strategy. We used to have a lot more businesses in the group. But sort of one by one, we've either flipped them out, spun them out, or sold them. And ourselves, we've been acquired over the last 2 years by a company called KT, Korea Telecom. Before that, I'm not sure a lot of people can tell with my accent. It's a bit mixed up now. But
you're not from London, are you?
I'm not from London. No, I'm a long way from London. No, I'm from a place called Melbourne, not Melbourne, Florida, but Melbourne, Australia. And I started in a company called Telecom Australia at the time, and now Telstra.
Telstra, yeah.
And I started off in development. Well, really, I found myself in development, working, building applications for internal use and eventually intelligent network platforms. So I'm actually a platform guy all the way back. We were developing GUI programmable interfaces on voice-enabled intelligent networks, in the 90s, which
Wow.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We created really the first interface that I ever knew about that allowed you to create, say, a call flow for premium rate numbers, 0800 numbers, 1-800 over there,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to kind of drop in some kind of voice message. So yeah, really interesting stuff. So that's actually kind of my DNA is really that development side, and then moving into product management to product manage those IN platforms. And eventually I moved here in the 90s with Telstra as we set up and started operating as a telco service provider internationally. And I ended up being with Telstra in London for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
heading up as the head of European product and marketing, but went native and decided to stay. So I spent about 8-9 years in the roaming industry as well. I left to join Capgemini actually, and then
Mm-hmm.
spent a couple of years at Capgemini heading up their service lines in the UK, and then jumped ship into the roaming industry, which was an amazing experience. A lot of cash at the
Right.
time
Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
international roaming, and also a lot of M&A. So actually, as a kind of product and marketing guy involved in a lot of M&A, there's quite a famous company based in Tampa in the US called Cineverse,
Mm-hmm.
one of
Mm-hmm.
the enablers of international roaming. So my company was acquired by them. I left, joined a startup. That went very well, and then we were acquired by Cineverse, so I couldn't escape Cineverse for a while. But one thing I did learn was a lot about a really interesting part of the industry that, a bit like the internet world, which I'm heavily involved with as well, it's kind of a secret area not a lot of people know about. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it was great. And then eventually I was building platforms. Uh, and this is where I got exposed to stuff like WebRTC, and then sort of browser-based telecommunications functions, um, developing platforms for companies like BT, their Meet Me 2 platform, etc. But then I joined Epsilon 9 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
interesting journey at Epsilon. We were essentially a startup company 20 years ago, but after 10 years, had really evolved to a point where, as a real pivot moment, let's call it, they sort of got to a point where there's still not that much automation,
Right.
spreadsheets, price sheets still in Excel, and doing really well. It's just that things really started to slow down. So they're looking for somebody, I guess, really to knock on the door of digital transformation. So
Yeah.
both internally, but then the first thing I did when I came to the organization was look at, okay, this is cool, but don't you guys know about SDN and platforms, and how are we going to present our services to our customers over the next 10 years? So I came in and wrote a strategy, worked very closely with a colleague of mine called Vibeke Harder, who heads up our global engineering and development. So basically, the two of us sat down and wrote a strategy that
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, we need to think about how we're going to present our services in essentially match the characteristics of the cloud. So that's what we've done over the last 10 years. And
Yeah, which is exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, and I like the way that
yeah,
you phrased that like have your services as a telco essentially, right? Not traditional telco, obviously, until later, which we'll
yeah,
get to, right? But
yeah,
what I wanted to talk about was kind of the evolution into what we're calling NaaS, now network as a service, right?
yeah,
And Epsilon has been at the forefront of that, I think, from my position, probably before a lot of people were using that word. There were these concepts around. So that's what I want to focus in on first. Is we've talked quite a few times on this show about NaaS, and everyone sort of comes at that from a slightly different perspective. What is Mark's definition of NaaS as it would be consumed by, say, an enterprise IT infrastructure team?
Uh, yeah, so for me, it's basically think of any network element that you would use in the enablement of your business, presenting all of those elements as an individual component or a knitted together solution, orchestrating that yourself if you choose to do so. And I have basically a kind of a rule of 6 of the functions that you would expect from a NaaS. We can talk about that in a second. And then being able to essentially control that as if it was your own network without the commitment of investing in infrastructure, CapEx, et cetera. But to me, the network of the service as a service is individual items, and that has become verticalized and horizontalized. And what I mean by that is a true network as a service. If you're looking at, and I think you've mentioned terms to me, we've spoken in the past, end to end or cloud or whatever. But think of the horizontalization of network as a service is like literally connections and network from any point to any point. So that could include your business address, your cloud, your internet, if you're an internet exchange member or if you're just using broadband. So it really merges the concept between physicality and functionality and presents that end to end or piecemeal. And then the verticalization of that is, okay, do I want network transport? Do I want network overlay with insight? Do I want to strengthen my network services through a security drop-in or something like that? So to me, network as a service then wraps that up and presents that in some form of either point-and-click portal or SDK. So that's a very holistic viewpoint from my perspective if I'm in the enterprise. And the other element, the network as a service, gives a lot of people don't talk about, but if I'm in a large-scale enterprise where I have maybe my own IT division or even net ops IT divisions, and some banks do, as an example, to me, network as a service offers me the opportunity to build my own network as a service platform. And I think that's the really exciting bit for the big guys. And then you think, okay, so if I can do that, I was talking to a really big, actually, American bank. It was during the pandemic, so a year or two ago, around the exposure of the core network for those guys in particular who actually need to focus on latency, disaster recovery.
Right.
So what if they could actually be utilizing network as a service collectively with a lot of different suppliers, their own console to present that or portal, and then start to make decisions based on some kind of logic feed in on route decisions or route decisions wherever you come from in the world. But,
exactly.
It was like, okay, actually, I need to be routing my traffic at the submarine cable level based on certain decisions or incidents. So I look at network as a service as really holistically, and I know some of my colleagues in the industry will have a much thinner viewpoint.
Yeah, sometimes just as simple as kind of your lead in, which was consuming network like you consume cloud services. But you're really talking about kind of, to put it this way, the whole OSI stack, right, as well as a degree of control over the network, like with routing, that sort of thing. So kind of
but accessing that as if it was a cloud service.
Right. Consuming it like you consume cloud, but also has to be integrated with that degree of control. And policy setting and visibility, obviously, in order to do these things, right? So I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, so, and it's happened. All of these, everything I spoke about, and probably more, is happening around the world right now, but in kind of chunks. And some folks, like, we really focused on connecting the internet, through platforms, as an example, because we're a big wholesale company. We start in wholesale, so accessing peering and remote peering through a programmable interface is monetizable for us really quickly, right? But the other angle is that, in my past, I was very aware of this emerging CPaaS industry as it started. In fact, people have probably heard of a fabulous company called Twilio. But there was a company before Twilio called Ribbit that I was very familiar with. Ribbit was actually acquired by BT, and then sort of bought into BT, not let loose on the market. So Twilio came in, did a fabulous job. So understanding Twilio is like, these dudes here, like, presenting programmable telephony as part of their SDK into the enterprise. Their success was based on not targeting enterprise companies, targeted individuals and job titles, developers, application developers. That's how they really grew, and it's fabulous. And it was like, okay, we're a voice company as well. It's like, we need to go over to the West Coast, talk to these dudes and say, look, we could present you a programmable interface from the network up. So you can just dive in, grab a telephone number, put it in your SDK from command from the customer, and just have that whole thing work, in one kind of series of commands. And so that's network as a service. In this case, voice.
Right.
So you got these chunks, and that starts to build up to me that the network of the service as a service platform is going to be another enablement platform for almost the agile solution mentality, where, say, and we got an RFP from let's call it a cloud, born in the cloud, what do you got? Realtor companies in the US.
Yeah.
And basically, there's a 2-page RFP that said, we want to set a new office up in Chicago, and we need this, 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 and this. And I was like, oh man, if you could do that on a portal, that would be like, yeah, okay, connection to the internet, drop in a UCaaS stack, give them a telephone number. It's all not right now. No one can do this now.
Right. But this is the vision. Yeah.
Click. As long as you've got a physical connection to the internet in that building they're moving into, and Wi-Fi obviously set up, your whole business could be deployed in a few minutes. That's what NaaS will enable in the future as well. So when we started at the SDN point, SDN, very, very network orientated at the start. But what NaaS has done is really, really enabled us to stretch those boundaries of what it is that we can be presented that relate to network, of course. And I think that's why I love the term and concept of NaaS, because it is so flexible in its use. But I look at it holistically going, man, this just gives folks like us, you as an analyst and myself as a product guy, the ability to really sit there and go, we can do anything with this.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fascinating kind of way of looking at it. But that the end goal has been something that people on both sides, the vendor side, the enterprise side, whatever, have had on their minds for so long, which is, why can't I, find, purchase and manage my network the way that I do that for software or anything else, like all kinds of consumer things, right? And so, and the answer is, obviously we're working towards that. There's a lot of complicated steps to get through, particularly as you alluded to before on the end-to-end prospect of that. It's one thing between data centers, right? But I wondered, since you have so much background on this, can you take us a little bit into kind of that, a little bit more? You touched on this, but that evolution of what was, when I first heard about SDN, I don't know, probably around 10 years ago, thinking of it as purely like a carrier technology, it wasn't even really something that would concern enterprises. And then maybe SD-WAN took some of that capability sort of, but now we're looking at like what we were thinking about with SDN 10 years ago on the carrier level to a consumable service. Could you take us through that evolution a little bit, maybe?
Yeah. So I've been across that for a long time, at least as long as you. And SDN, as a definition, was really driven at the time by two groups of people: network people, network carrier people, and the opportunity of what could be deployed within the data center environment. So you had your data center folks who were setting up things like meet me rooms, et cetera, who were really interested in the term software-defined networking and how they could simplify the logistics within their data center. But then you had the carriers like us or telcos like us who are sitting there going, how do we present our network to ourselves at the time so that we can bring the deployment downtime from 20 minutes? I said 20 minutes, I wish. From 20 days.
Exactly.
To 5 days. Right. At the time, it was, okay, we need to build a core. We need an orchestration layer over and above that. And then what we need to do is expose that to our own engineers so that they can orchestrate services really quickly, particularly for either the really large incumbents who were the major sponsors at the time of a lot of and put a lot of the investment in terms of the definition of SDN, and those companies that served internationally. So that really started to evolve, though, and what we started to see was the vendors getting on board and starting to present APIs out of their equipment. And that was the key. Once you got a Juniper or a Nokia, whoever it was, that started to make it easy to access the functionality within the tin, that made it a lot simpler. And that really took some time. And the reality of that was, it was really only, I would say, probably 9 to 10 years ago when the functions really started to be presented up. And we at Epsilon, when I joined, we were a BTI house for our next gen, our concept of what are we going to do next generation, because BTI were one of those companies that first said, okay, we need to ring fence conceptually all of these functions in our box and then present those out as programmable. And so that was really oh man, this is awesome. We're going to need developers and that's a digital transformation thing in our organization, but that was really the difference. Then, so we got to that point and it's like, okay, most of this in reality is utilizing point-to-point Ethernet connectivity. We better start to look at, okay, what does Ethernet as a technology allow us to do? And that was a hard thing. This is what organizations like MEF did really well, is they brought people together to start to relate to the service and the programmable capability that you were getting out of the boxes. And so then, supporting different types of VLAN connectivity and multi connectivity options. And then, but what really drove the success, in my opinion, of SDN from a networking perspective was when the cloud started providing APIs, because because that attracted the real interest of the enterprise folks.
Right. I need to connect to my hyperscaler. It wasn't called a hyperscaler then, but yeah.
So that was, okay, there's light bulb moments. You could see it like at some of those early, you guys used to run a really awesome event, the WAN Summit, right? You could really start to see that stuff kind of go, yeah, okay, I get it, because I'm now talking to somebody who's trying to understand the cloud, the fact that they've got these programmable, easy to program or point and click functions. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I could do that with network as well. Yeah, that before that, the interest in providing a point-to-point connection across a single network programmably, yeah, okay, that's cool. Good for us, because it saved. I mean, our internal ROI absolutely covered investment, right?
Right.
But getting that enterprise interest wasn't that interesting.
Yeah, when it's a kind of one-off, point to point sort of thing, rather than this holistic vision that you have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark, before we move on to other stuff, I want to circle back to something you alluded to and make sure that we catch it. But I think you said you have like 6 characteristics of NaaS. Is that right? Or what are those?
Yeah. So the first one is, and this is just based on, I was just sitting down in Amazon, right? So not specific, but the first one is, or first step, and they're all, I call them ables, is visible. So your inventory has to be visible to the user, which seems like it's easy, but for a network, sometimes that's not so easy. But presenting the functions that you want, whether it's layer 2 networking, some kind of layer 3 function, whether it's a security virtual device, all of that inventory's got to be visible. So that's the first step.
And you've got to have that all known internally after all acquisitions or whatever that have happened. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge. Exactly. Not figuring out how to present it to the customer, but just understanding it well yourselves, right? So.
Oh, exactly. And the whole internal management of that, somebody takes a physical device off a shelf and puts it somewhere else, is that being managed and presented out as Amazon would do? It comes off the shelf to be delivered. It's automatically off the inventory.
Right.
So it sounds like easy, but we had some challenges, particularly at the start. It also, for all the telcos out there as well, if you're just looking at exploring or entering the, let's call it SDN world at the start, is the most important thing you have to do first is inventory and availability and getting your alignment of databases and stuff like that. Really interesting but difficult stuff. But that second point is it's visible. So it's exactly the same as me wanting to go and buy a shirt on Amazon. Okay, it has shirts, but what's my shirt size? What color do I want? It's exactly the same with networking. Do I want it from A to B? What speeds and for how long? All that kind of stuff. So that configurability. I like the configuration. I've done it. Second step is priceable. So I now get presented a price. Now, to get to that point, if you're out there trying to develop something on your initial journey for NaaS, getting to that ability to present a price is a really good sort of step. And then the fourth point is orderability as well. So presenting a price, don't lose the opportunity, make it orderable. Again, it's almost like you can draw a line after this fourth step and say, "Whew, we got here.
Right.
We
made a
cool.
sale."
Yeah. Because there are a lot. I mean, you think of the telco world and the percentage of companies that haven't got to that point overall. Think globally. It's the majority percentage. So if you can get to that point, you're on your way. And in reality, I guess, that visual exposure to your customer base already is created a much more differentiated user experience than somebody who is still taking orders, via email or however.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So then step 5 is really your SDN, your NaaS functionality that can control or orchestrate services. I call it deployable or deployability. So the ability to take that configuration and push it down into the network or push it up into the cloud to do something. So that deployability, that's the hard bit. That's the SDN bit.
Right.
And then the sixth bit is manageability. So my service is live. It's visual. I can see it's healthy. I can see its performance, jitter, latency, whatever it is. And even if I can't do anything else, then go, oh, it's red, I got to call somebody.
Right.
I'm now being given some form of control that telcos traditionally were terrible at. And I'm an old school telco person. blind is good, right? A customer can't see it's working, but can't see it's not working. So it's probably better that they just can't see, right? So now it's the other way. It's like if I'm not exposing how my service is performing for that customer, then I'm not really serving that customer. And so it's really, really important to bring that together. And there are a lot of companies out there that develop the SDN and the manageability part separately.
Mm-hmm.
This is the beauty of NaaS. NaaS brings that holistically together because if I'm going to take a network as a service, I have to be able to see it, right?
Right.
And so it's really important that you're presenting all of this holistically, at least as a portal or as some form of series of APIs. So those 6 steps: visibility, configurability, priceability, deployability, orderability. I missed out. Deployability and manageability. If you just sit there and go, right, where am I on these 6 steps?
Right.
It's a pretty good start. And it's also, it's a measurability. If I'm an analyst, and I'm not trying to suggest to you anything, but if I was an analyst comparing NaaSes and SDNs and stuff like that, I would be I'd be looking at those as 6 measurements, because there is not everybody who says they're NaaS or SDN that can do all of those 6, all in the same environment.
No, absolutely. I was just going to say, as an analyst, I love lists with clear definitions like that. I can guarantee that'll make it into the blog post about this episode because it makes it very clear. And you're right that with all of these kinds of technologies that emerge in this space, there's some people call it whatever NaaS washing or whatever but I think that might not mean exactly what I mean, which is just that it takes time to congeal onto, okay, well, what does this actually mean between me and the customer, right? Not that someone's trying to squish, something into it in a sort of deceptive way, but that there needs to emerge kind of out of, folks like you working with meth, for example, or whatever, to some extent, but really also just in the market, like what actually works, right? What do customers end up needing? What do they end up buying? And marrying sort of what we can do at the technology level at the carrier to actually make that happen, right?
Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting. As a couple of years ago now, I was at a WAN summit, I think it was, and saw some presentations from some enterprises that had deployed SD-WAN. And so they were some early big company deployments, and they got sold like we did as well. So I'm putting my hand up to say I got sold this, but they got sold that it's cheaper. You don't need traditional networking. You can use internet-orientated services like DIA or whatever. SD-WAN's going to make everything joyously wonderful, etc. And so they deployed what was suggested at the time by those vendors, and soon found out that losing control of your transport layer didn't exactly do them a lot of favors, et cetera, et cetera. And so, to your point, it was like those sort of companies just kind of grew into understanding that these things started to mold together, but they were coming at us and companies like us with their own viewpoint of what it is that they actually needed from what emerged for some of those companies as network as a service. And it was really interesting to see that they were actually came in from a completely different direction. For them, it was about, okay, I've got this SD-WAN thing. I've got really good visibility that it's not performing or it's not improving my application experience.
All that does is tell me that it's not performing.
Yeah. So now I'm going to need a network that I can control underneath so that I can start to tweak that to work better to enable the layer above. And so it was a different angle. And it was like, okay, well, how would we present that? And so the next logical thing is, and I'll be frank, we haven't built this as yet, but it's one of the things work on is that So we came as carriers And telcos it's almost like a bottom-up integration and presentation, right? So we've got physical network here. Let's expose that functionality, put it in a level above and orchestrate. And then you look at like what these folks they're going, no, the other direction. We don't care about that bottom layer, but what we do care about is our application is telling us that, or our application-enabled SD-WAN is telling us that some performance is really bad. So it needs to talk to the network below to tell that network what to do. I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's the secret sauce. And, people talk about AI and networking or whatever. But in my opinion, it's the application overlays that are the AI, that they're the ones that actually know what's going on purely because they're not performing. So they're the ones that, to me, the next step, the MEF is doing they're really cotton onto this as well, is for those people who follow what the MEF is doing is they've started building sort of API concepts and stuff for SD-WAN. And people are thinking, this is cool, like make SD-WAN interwork or whatever. Nah, make SD-WAN interwork with the network.
With the network, right? Not with with other SD-WANs or other over the top services like SASE, and that's important, but it's really to communicate between those layers.
Exactly. So you can start to think, this term I use, verticalization. Start to think about, that really starts to make sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, whatever I'm going to drop over the top of the network, it should be able to tell the network what it needs.
Right.
So I think that's the next NaaS thing. Mm-hmm. And you can't really call it. You can kind of call it SDN, I guess, but to me, it's more network as a service, but multi-layered network as a service. And so you would expect that if you buy an SD-WAN in the future, you would be able to deploy a network that's appropriate to what the SD-WAN is telling you it needs in the future, right? So I've kind of jumped ahead, I guess, a little bit to
that's it. Yeah,
network evolution and stuff.
Right.
But I mean, it just makes. I mean, you look at it and go, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Going back to thinking about sort of when the WAN Summit, we would see presentations from folks who were early adopters of this technology. It started to be that, okay, we've done SD-WAN. Now we've identified, after we've moved to an internet first kind of strategy, that we have a middle mile problem, right? Which is, I think, speaks exactly to what you're saying, that SD-WAN is at the edge, right? Sort of, and really couldn't do anything about the performance, getting to your cloud provider or your traffic's ultimate destination. And so then there were some other over-the-top tools trying to help with that, but that ultimately, really what you need is one, I should say, because coming at it as telegeography, you have to have wires everywhere to do all these things you're talking about, right? So we need lots of fiber deployments or 5G or maybe LEO someday, and then you have to be able to talk to all of those different technologies in the underlay as well, right? So it's and those wires might be Ethernet, like we mentioned before, but they might be something else that DWM.
We'll get down to the optical layer soon.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it is a complex problem, right? But I like your vision of how clearly we can see, what needs to happen to come to this world that we're thinking about,
Yeah, and I think another angle that is definitely emerging, and I'm really old, so when I first started working in international telecoms way back, there were alliances, and they were proper alliances. Some of those alliances evolved into third-party entities. Back in the day, it was like BT and AT&T in concert. Telstra was mixed up in that for a little while. Global world partners, stuff like that. Most of those alliances. Don't kill me, anyone, if you work for those alliances. But most of those alliances who created third-party entities, they ended up failing because the third-party entity took a life of its own, started to set its own objectives.
Yeah, right.
And that in the end always causes problems. And I went through that as well with Telstra and PCCW and an entity called Reach. But the alliances that kind of work together, and I'm so old that my first product management job was for something called Telecom. That was one of the greatest alliances ever of all of these companies all around the world, enabling you to use your telecard around the world. And the mobile world is the same. They just work, right? It's, in my opinion, it's starting to happen now in the data networking side. There are alliances being formed. We are forming alliances and have formed alliances and beginning to interwork our SDN orchestration capabilities. A couple of other companies very near and familiar to me as well. The MEF is doing its bit. So what you'll see over the next 5 years or so is these alliances actually offering more of that horizontability, if that's the word, horizontal integration to present more network under a common, let's call it API or portal for the end customer. That also sets up, when you think of, one of the big issues that SD-WAN really created was brilliant service, and that I've got to refresh all my different sites all around the world. And if I'm going to move to DIA, a lot of different service providers, it really brought back that, thing, international, multinational is difficult. And so I really see a trend in the NaaS world for NaaS interoperability, at least at the orchestration level and the physical network level. So that to me is kind of like something that obviously you have to be working in the carrier world to see it, but is definitely happening. Right. And so, I'd be keeping an eye on that as well. And if you're seeing like telcos and carriers saying they have gazillions of POPs programmable all around the world, I can absolutely guarantee you that
they're not all theirs, right?
Yeah, they have already set up alliances. And so these aren't partnerships like we would traditionally call them.
Not with like a formal NNI or something like that. It's more dynamic than that, basically.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, we're getting a lot of interworking queries over this physical location. We better plop an NNI in play. So setting a lot of preconditions up on this alliance, as opposed to traditionally our partnerships of, here's our discounted price sheet, here's yours, let's set an NNI up here, and we'll train each other's sales folks and off we go. This has to be much more dynamic, as you said.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is that ultimately it's from an economics kind of standpoint, you're removing friction, you're removing transaction costs, but also, so part of that is you're removing these, we have to meet, we have to exchange these Excel sheets, we have to, set up an ordering system with each other. But also that there's that technology bit that means that I also need to be able to have visibility into your network, because I have the end customer who can see that there's a fault, and I don't, want to have my engineers open a trouble ticket with your knock, right, or whatever, right? So there's a lot of layers to cut through beyond just the ordering, right? So
absolutely. There's also some disconnecting kind of opportunities that programmability and NaaS have kind of created, the concept of NaaS have kind of created, and this concept of simplifying how we as telcos work together. So there are now kind of third-party entity trading. They're not really trading, they're kind of marketplace entities. You might be familiar with some of them, like LMX and Inflect in the US, and Cloudbase down in APAC and stuff like that. So these are still, to me, these are a product of what we as, you as telco folks have been working on over the years, many years really, to make things simpler. But there's still, I think, a really big secret to the enterprise market, because I know those organizations would absolutely love enterprises to utilize them as pricing tools and stuff like that. So I think there's going to be some challenge as to where they go directionally. and how we as telco guys utilize them.
Right.
I think we have to view them as a marketplace,
Right.
and we have to basically, for our own NaaS success, present things like the inventory and the config, all those 4 steps. We have to start to enable from our own NaaS environment into these third-party environments, kind of like stretch the function in a way, so that if they do have eyeballs using them, we need also almost to extend that capability. And then the other challenge we have as well is the concept of the cloud, and how people are relating its value as their focus area, and yet not really considering network as that important. Yet it's one of the 3 pillars of cloud success: networking, and as well as the physical location and basically the process capability in the software. So it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean our NaaS needs to be presentable within that cloud environment, even as part of the cloud marketplace stack? And I think that's inevitable in some way, shape, or form. Or does the cloud guys just flip it around and they bring all our NaaS API functions together, and they just go?
I was going to say that there is a version of the future where we're all just interacting with AWS, basically.
Correct. And we've sat in this room and contemplated how that would look and how we would fit into that as well in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so Mark, before we wrap up, I just want to touch a little bit on kind of Epsilon itself. You've been weaving that throughout here, but from an analyst perspective, many years ago, Epsilon was the kind of company that we had trouble fitting neatly into a box, not quite like a facilities-based carrier or whatever. But then you had this acquisition by Korea Telecom. How did that sort of morph what Epsilon had been and to then having the power of a sort of facilities-based network and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined 10 years ago, we were a telecommunications solution provider. So we don't lay our own cable or anything like that. Right. We resell. We lease and resell. We knit together the function. We obviously buy the equipment and build our own network. But essentially, we will light fiber and we'll sell waves and stuff. But our big focus over the last 10 years has been providing Ethernet. So if you were to categorize us now, we're an international middle mile enabler that also extends to the last mile. So we try and knit, we really try and knit a solution together, because when we started, our entire customer base was international carriers. So we have like 600 international and national carriers. So we were like looking at, what's our value really compared to a lot of other folks? We're not a national incumbent. I've worked for a couple of those. But our value was really a telecoms facilities and service provider for that ecosystem. So we filled the gap originally for some telco that, when we started 20 years ago, it was companies like BT and Belgacom, Bix, who really funded Epsilon through business. Because they just said, look, we're not in this place. Can you do that for us? Right. And so we kind of filled gaps and built our network around that. But right now we're a middle mile extending to the last mile company, essentially positioning ourselves as we're an interconnect company now. So we have an interconnect fabric that interconnects lots of different entities and presents that out as a simple, accessible network solution to customers. We're really, really focused on the interconnect of things. So this world now, when you and not the traditional thing, right, of IoT or whatever, but let me start this point. In my opinion, and even our own internal network designers now, I created this thing called, and actually Cisco termed this, I think, in the year 2001, application-orientated networking. They had a different application for it. It was actually for something else. But if you sit down and you go, oh, man, I've got to redesign my network right now, you starting at your applications, not at physical locations. You're going, right, where's my CRM? Where's my ERP? Where's my UCaaS stack? So you're going, right, and which of these interact with each other? Which of these are mission critical to interact with each other? Now you're kind of redesigning your network based on the application. And so for us, we had to look at, okay, what does that mean for us and our customers? So we start to present that we're providing interconnection to those application environments. So then where are they physically located? So you could take data centers, right? Business buildings.
Yeah, I was going to say, to interject for a second, to put a pin on that for everybody to follow along, that obviously during this time is the big transformation, all of these service applications being cloud-based. And so, they're
correct.
Have moved off-prem, and now there gets this middle mile, problem or whatever, right? So.
Absolutely. And the thing is, during this transition period or transformation period, really, it's like, how do I get from here to there as well? And so for us, early things were like migration challenge. Do you have a network solution that could help migrate from my premise to the cloud, right? Yeah, you can send some storage boxes and, AWS happily come, send you something to back your on-prem stuff and put it into AWS. But it was like, okay, we can't stay at just being middle mile, because a lot of this was early local connectivity requirements into the core of the middle mile. And so that's why Epsilon is very specifically, we say we are middle mile that provides a last mile solution as an underlay to provide global interconnect. And what are you trying to interconnect and access? But those transition opportunities really changed. I mean, it was difficult for me coming in as an evangelist for SDN or whatever and saying, but there's no programmability at the last mile. It's like, what can we do about that? Well, that's okay. We can fudge it for now, but guess what? There are local incumbents now who are presenting in various places around the world, programmable connections to business prem. So you can see, oh man, that is so awesome, right? And theoretically, you'll be able to, from your desktop, sat here in my building right now, as an example, create programmable network connection for a day or a week or whatever from the desktop all the way through to AWS, link that into Oracle, build the network connection between Oracle and AWS, and have everything in a private network. So, that was really, okay, we can't position ourselves as anything but an interconnection company. So that's the viewpoint that we come from. And we also had to consider, interestingly enough, is a lot of people don't talk about the internet exchanges. So, the internet exchanges now, Azure peering points are internet exchanges that enterprises can access now. So that's driving interest from not just banks, but we just deployed a government solution to connect directly via the London Internet Exchange directly into the Azure application stack. That's really cool. Now that's completely off the public internet, completely off the old dedicated Azure model, which is kind of a bit complex, straight into an IX, which is regulated by the government. And I'm essentially I'm an enterprise peering, so it's really cool. But so that's why we were really cool. So we developed the IX API with the internet exchange industry to make that programmable. So we were the first carrier to have that because we helped develop it. But you could see, okay, because we had a look, okay, where's the maps accessibility stack? It's in the IX. Okay, we need to incorporate that type of stuff. So, but yeah, for us, application, devices, human beings all need to be interconnected. So that's kind of our positioning. We interconnect your world.
Yeah, excellent. I like that. I think that's a good tagline to wrap things up on. So, thanks, Mark. This has been really interesting. I'm probably going to learn a lot when I go back through the second time and listen to this for my intro. So, are you perchance going to be at the MEF GNE event in October?
I am indeed. So yeah, if you're going to be there, that's going to be awesome, dude. Definitely hang it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be, I think, an inflection point where a lot of these things are actually coming together. So it's going to be fun to see what everybody's been doing. So yeah.
Absolutely, and we can test some of my thought processes. But yeah, I'm at that event. I'm really looking forward to asking a lot of questions about integrating the MEF SD-WAN type APIs that they've been working on with the MEF layer 2 Ethernet LSO.
Right.
Orchestration stuff, because I think there's some real secret sauce magic there.
I agree. That is going to be the thing to watch. Excellent. Yeah. All right, so Mark, how can folks keep up with you otherwise if they're not going to be at the GNE event or Epsilon in general?
Yeah, cool. Well, my email address, if anyone wants to email me, is m.daley, DALEY, @epsilontel.com. My Twitter handle is, or X, my X handle, is at Mark O Daley. So MarkoDaley 1, the digit 1, and I'm on LinkedIn. Just search Mark Daley Epsilon Tel, and that'll come up.
Yeah, cool. We can put those in the show notes too for anybody without a pen handy here. Cool. Yeah, excellent. Well, Mark, this was great fun, super interesting. So I look forward to catching up with you soon at that event.
Awesome, dude. I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you in Dallas.
Yeah, cool. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Telegeography Explains the Internet comes from the experts here at Telegeography. It's edited and produced by Jane Miller, and it's hosted by me, Greg Bryan. And I also wrote that theme song you're listening to right now. To learn more about our data, jump over to telegeography.com, and we'll see you on the internet.